UFC gym, but I'm regular job as a associate athletic director at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. I've been there for about
introduction. But you know what, for the sake of argument,
Yeah.
could you please tell some of the viewers who you are?
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Paul. Vince Baldemor. I'm one of your clients. And happy to have met you through UFC gym. But I'm regular job as a associate athletic director at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. I've been there for about 2.5 years. But been in collegiate athletics and professional sports for about a little bit over 20.
Jeez. And because you were the AD at was it HP?
HPU, Hawaii
HPU.
Pacific
That's
University.
right. That's right.
And then, so in Hawaii, I was at the University of Hawaii for about 11 years, then HPU for about 5, and now UH again for about 2.5.
And you were originally, I think you were saying that you were originally from the mainland as well, right?
Born in Philly.
Born in Philly.
Yeah.
Well, how's the song going? Born in Philly, born and raised. What you call it? Anyhow, I don't need to quote all of my Will Smith trivia. So one of the things that we get to talk about a lot when we're usually working out together is, well, obviously we got to know each other through that means. But I did want to talk about like the state of athletics and things that are going on at UH. I think that's a big question for a lot of people, and I'm sure you've probably had many interviews and Zoomcasts and probably even media that was contacting you about it. I think in some cases, since we're talking today, we're right at that turning point with since we're in tier 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's been any changes that has gone on with collegiate sports and whatnot. Let's actually start off in saying, like, what were some of the biggest changes from a pre-COVID and post-COVID? And we'll summarize this because I'm sure that list starts going on and on.
Yeah, no, I mean, good question. I think the obvious is the lack of fans, right? Pre-COVID, we had fans at the events. We had open practices where media could be on the field, asking interviews after practices. We had athletic training was a lot more open. Now it's more structured and appointments, and even strength and conditioning is, it used to be a lot more, you could have multiple guys on a rack or on a bench press, and now you got to really be kind of structured and organized.
Wow. Well, yeah, we definitely want to circle back on like the big picture. As far as like your job and the things that you oversee, what were some of the biggest changes? Because you've kept working this entire time.
Yeah, we have a really good team. Our athletic director, my boss, has really done a great job in making sure that we can continue to operate and keep our student athletes out there. The University of Hawaii has 500 student athletes, 21 different sports, and when COVID hit, a lot of that had to just stop, right? A lot of practices, a lot of competitions, but we were able to take that time to kind of reorganize, put plans and processes, put different protocols in place so that we can slowly start to get everybody back on the field, back in the gym, and continuing to work on their game. The academic portion, was an adjustment as well. Our department, works with the academic side, and there was a lot of online classes, right? A lot of taking your school classes from home, but then you might have to do workouts online, for the time being. So
you're talking about the current athletes that should be technically in a season at the moment.
When it first hit, when COVID for us, I think it was actually, it must have been about a year ago. This is almost March.
Right.
So if I remember correctly, March for us was when our basketball team was on the road competing in a tournament, and they made the cut, and they basically said, we can't compete anymore. Everybody has to go home, or we can't finish this tournament. So to me, that's the reminder of everything changed at that moment. So what happened was a lot of the student athletes, they couldn't practice, right? They would either be in their dorm room or their apartment or house or wherever it is, and they couldn't come to campus. Campus was a ghost town. So, video workouts, lots of texting, lots of phone calls, lots of, FaceTiming, just to, keep the kids the student athletes active.
Yeah, it's so funny that it hasn't really quite dawned on me that yes, this is almost marking one year for us as the gym, or at least inside my experience. We were starting to hear like this buildup that was going on with the media and the concern. I remember working at Kailua at that time, and then progressively starting to see a kind of a drop off in gym attendance as well as clientele. And I think just by, I don't know, coincidence, but I at the time was working with a lot of people that probably would be classified as high risk. And so I could see my clientele start dropping down pretty quickly. And then, yeah, it was like, I think somewhere in the last part of March, I forgot the exact day, that the gyms and corporately they said, okay, we're going to pull the plug, everybody quarantine at home. These are what's been going on, ever since then. And I'm glad that we are starting to climb out of it. But there's still a lot of things that haven't changed. Definitely, is there any type of changes for UH going into Tier 3?
I think right now, we've been fortunate that, we're competing, right? So our teams, our spring season, which baseball's starting to play, softball and men's volleyball and tennis and golf, all of those sports are competing. So that's a great thing. We haven't heard any word yet on fans in the stands, right? So that's still, I think Tier 3 is only 10, right? It's kind of like gatherings of 10. But having large gatherings of people watching sports is still not, it's not green lighted yet.
I think one interesting thing, and this kind of reminds me of a conversation we had in one of our workouts. We were talking about like, obviously we're open and we're a very large gym, but I was also asking like what was going on with the student center. Were students allowed to work out with it? In some cases, I think you could say that our gym model can show that we can be open, but obviously there's a lot more logistics when it comes to student athletes.
Yeah, I would say that I've been impressed with what you guys have been able to do here and keep everybody safe and social distancing and operating the gym during this time. I think at the university, it's the campus is closed, right?
Yeah.
So most of the classes are still online. So there's not a lot of students walking around on campus. And as a result of that, and just the safety side of it, the campus rec, the student gym, all of those are still shut down. So I don't know what they're doing. Like intramurals, right? Generally on campus, you might have intramural basketball or intramural football or whatever it is. None of those activities are happening right now. But I know that they're working to try and get that back started.
Yeah, I think I remember one time we were talking about budget, and this is something that I think obviously as the average gym member, nobody ever cares about operations and business goings. But I think it's definitely, COVID has exposed and unfortunately has shut down a lot of businesses, not just within the health and fitness industry, but just overall. I remember in a weird way I was talking about masks, and I noticed that you're wearing the Under Armour, what you call it, and those ones aren't cheap. Those ones are pretty expensive, right?
Yeah, they're thick, they're heavy. It's kind of 2 or 3 different. It's a lot heavier than just a cotton mask.
Right, and I know there was a few other coaches that have a similar one, and I was always asking about it. I'm always trying to find a better mask that, at least for function wise, to be able to stay on my face and do the things that we have to do on a regular basis. But it kind of shocked me because you were saying how many of those masks are issued to the student athletes and whatnot? Because aren't these like retail? I think it was like $30, $25, $30.
Yeah, I mean, I think online these are $30. I know that Under Armour is a partner with the University of Hawaii. Right, all our student athletes, our uniforms are Under Armour, so we have a relationship with them. And I don't know if there's a special deal that we got when this came out, but we do require that they have to wear an Under Armour mask versus you couldn't wear a Nike mask or an Adidas mask because it kind of goes against the whole being a part of the team.
Right. Well, I do bring this up in regards because it's like with the football team. Because would you say that what was the actually I'll let you answer this. What was the hardest sport to make COVID friendly during this time period?
Wow. I think the sports that every sport had some difficulty, right? Just a whole new change in how you approach your entire sport. And I think we made some adjustments, right? You don't have to wear the mask 100% of the time after you've been tested and you've been cleared and you're in a
Put
bubble,
into the bubble, yeah.
and you're in a safe space. But I think that there definitely were more challenges for those student athletes that are if they're running a lot or breathing heavy, right? Because obviously this is restricting that a little bit. So I wouldn't know if it's primarily a sport. Maybe for football it's maybe a little bit harder for the wide receivers, maybe less for the kicker. I don't know, right? But I think everybody's had to adjust a little bit.
Yeah, well, I could definitely, in my head, I could see how football would have been logistically the hardest, just because of the sheer number of people involved. I remember I was having a very casual conversation with another member, and they were saying, well, a basketball team only has like 6 people. I was like, 6 people plus plus the secondary, plus the coaches, then all the trainers, and then the number starts exponentially starting to ramp up.
Sure.
In some cases, what I'm trying to shed some light on is the appreciation of how much work it puts into getting these things going. It's not a very simple switch to flip, both logistically as well as financially. Even using the mask example, how many players are on the UH team?
I mean, there's only 11 on the field, but we have a team of around 100 student athletes, right? You always have backup role players for every position, and you have probably 10 plus coaches. So there's a family, there's a team there, and for football, it's probably over 100.
I'm sure, easily, and that's still, you go into the trainers and the security and all these other type of factors that go into it. So I mean, hats off for you guys to obviously, and hats off for the fact that UH won a bowl game.
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, this was kind of a unique experience, right? We're all going through it, but I think it really gives a lot of credit to the teams that are in front of student athletes on a daily basis, because those are the ones that have to do the most work, right? If you're talking about the athletic training team, that's taking care of treatment and recovery and really just managing their physical condition, as well as the strength and conditioning guys that they're out there pushing them every day trying to get peak performance, but it's hard to do it in a COVID environment, right?
Yeah.
To the coaches on the field practicing and putting game plans in, and so all of that. But the key in all of this, and we're really lucky, but the number one factor in all of this is the student athlete for us, right? If the student athletes don't get it, don't buy in, and don't take it lightly, this whole thing is a house of cards, right?
Yeah.
Because what they do after, right? What they do after campus, when they go home, completely affects everything that they do.
Yeah, no, it really kind of shows how many things are so interconnected on that.
Yeah.
Which I definitely wanted to talk about, like the high school to college connection, because I've been training a few people that are in high school, and obviously fortunate people that have the funds and the resources to be able to afford the membership and training as well. But one of the things that I think in a much more generalized and bigger concern is scholarships and high school athletes getting that look, getting that ability to be able to continue sports at the college level, and that's something that is like, I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's an interesting time, because when it happened to us, when it happened a year ago in March, right? A lot of the spring sports ended up having their season cut short, and then those student athletes had to decide if they were going to graduate or they were going to stay another year. So what happened, the ripple effect was, if you were a senior on a men's volleyball team and your season was cut short and you wanted to stay another year, you could, but that might affect a senior in a high school coming onto the team, right? Because there's only so many spots on a men's volleyball team. So that's happening across the programs, across the country, where, the longer COVID happens, it's affecting high school sports, because they may not get the same number of opportunities to play in college, because those college kids are still there.
How is that kind of being looked at or handled at the moment? How do student athletes from the high school level get the best look in their prospective sports from UH's point of view?
I mean, I think that's the key right now. I mean, you hit it on the head, because in most cases, high school student athletes would have opportunities to showcase their ability, right? They'd be playing games, and you could catch it on television or get videotapes and send it to all the coaches around the country. Now it's trickier, right? Because you may not have competition, you may not have roster spots, scholarships. So I do think, from what I've seen, it's really up to the student athlete, just to continue to work with the coach and tell the coach that you're interested, and to find a spot and the right time.
One thing that I've maybe just call it maybe a difference in era now. I think I've always been a popular face within the UFC gyms in Hawaii, just for who I am and anybody that's been a gym member. But one thing that I attested my success as far as my business was concerned was always just word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, in the perfect case scenario, and it's not just me, when somebody goes to a fitness trainer and they're asking them, giving their goals, when the person starts getting results, then they should be happy, and they usually tell a friend. I used to always make the analogy, it's just like seeing a good movie, right? You go see a movie, if you liked it or not, you either tell a friend about it or you didn't. Do you see something like that as far as like maybe a high school student have to be more tenacious with a college in order to take that step, as opposed to before, your accolades and whatever you did on your sport, I'm like, look, I did 10 touchdowns today, you know what I mean? And those were things that usually were pretty apparent to the athletic department, but what might be some of that advice or whatnot, since you're saying for a student athlete?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, I'm not a coach, right? So, the coaches are looking for team players, right? They're looking for people that can fit into their program and fill a certain role. In some sports, you can't get the top level person on every team, because if you get the top person, if you get the top recruits in the country, it's going to be a dysfunctional team, right? So coaches are looking for team players. But coaches also are looking for people that are mature and that know how to manage their life, right? So I think a lot of it is how not aggressive, but how proactive the student athlete is. Professional emails, continuing to touch base. I'm still interested, because I will tell you, the coaches at least at the University of Hawaii, are getting hundreds, if not thousands of emails from student athletes all across the country. And you know, just for me managing my inbox, right? If you keep getting emails every single day from all of this, you know, you might lose some names, right?
Yeah.
So it's trying to make sure that you stay visible.
I see that in kind of pertaining it back to when I said it was like a lot of things have been word of mouth. I think on a similar, and I'm drawing correlations from this obviously, but I see it as coaches that were very successful from word of mouth, and there's been a lot of really good coaches, and unfortunately we've also lost a lot of really good coaches as well because of COVID. But I bring this up because now we're almost having to change our professional personal lifestyle to market ourselves more, usually through social media and things like this. You know, even this podcast for me started out one part therapeutic. I feel that being social is just as much as a muscle. I remember when the first lockdown unlocked, I found it hard just to talk to people, just getting outside, and just even, I probably wouldn't have this conversation with you if this was a couple months back, or it would have been, and I would have been really awkward at it. I'm probably still really awkward, but I've been getting better because I've been talking to more people and having this social job, which I can only imagine, like you being in the athletic business, you've always been in front of other people. So, which I want to kind of get back to get your take on some of this. But yeah, I see a lot of the newer generations, younger generations that are like their Instagram and whatnot is almost, I don't want to call it their resume, but there's this weird half and half that's kind of going on.
Yeah.
And
this internet thing ain't going away, right?
No, but I think it's this weird, like it's becoming more hooked in.
Yeah.
Like, because then how would a recruiter be able to see somebody? How does anybody, especially once you kind of, I wouldn't say the word of mouth is gone, but it definitely has evolved into a different element.
Well, I mean, and just even for our coaches, we see that, living in Hawaii, and a large part of recruiting for coaches is flying to different locations where you might have a tournament in California that you can see 20 schools and see 400 student athletes at one time.
Right.
With budgets and restrictions and travel and all of that, coaches can't do that.
Right.
So now they have to do it through emails and recruiting videos and word of mouth, like you said, and that's kind of the temporary new normal.
Okay. Well, I think that's a lot of good advice that I don't think things are being maybe spoken to at a high school level.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of which, actually, I wanted to kind of double back from maybe even on a personal point, because you have three athletic boys.
I have 2 boys and a daughter.
2 boys and a daughter.
Yep.
And you've been always telling me, like, they've been doing different athletic things and keeping as active as possible. One thing that I had kind of noticed and gleaned from other student athletes, high school student athletes, I would say, is kind of like how PE has been changing at the high school level. And I've always seen, especially from my high school days, I think PE's function, and I maybe don't quote me, but I'm just speaking from maybe a student's perspective, was to expose you to as many good sports, and hopefully that you latched on to whatever it was. Its goal wasn't necessarily to get you better, but it's just to hopefully feed you something that you like, right? And I think COVID, in my opinion, has really kind of changed that up, because it's now a health class. Since we don't have, not speaking for all schools, every school has different situations, but for the most part, just like what you're saying, there is no student involvement. The campuses have been closed up, different degrees. It's harder to have PE and health as a choice. And so I'm also seeing this kind of propagate down to at the high school level, because what would a student feel like taking in high school and whatnot?
it's been many years for me since I've been in high school, right? And you're right. I think the PE classes back in the day are completely different than the PE classes now. I ask my kids, and it is changing during this COVID time, right?
Yeah.
What they're learning, how much they can socialize with other kids. I mean, everything is all social distancing with masks and just being safe versus all the interaction.
Well, I was asking one of my students because they had said it's like what do you do online for PE? Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to point names or call out any schools in general, so I'm just going to keep this vague but still to the point. Is that it was teachers were a little bit lost, and I do have a lot of sympathy for teachers trying to deal with this thing that's never existed before. How are you going to teach baseball over Zoom? There's some things anecdotally that just have to happen. But I also see a large concern because in some cases it's evolved a little bit into a health class, which I think is a very good idea to do, especially in the middle of a pandemic. But at the same token, you're not. It's not. It's kind of like, here, make up a workout routine, and I'm assuming you're going to do it at some point.
Well, the middle child is in soccer and is on a club team.
Okay.
And to your point, they can't be on the pitch together, right? They can't be on the field and practice. So they will do stuff, in our living room with the iPad, Zoom kind of thing, and it's dribble the ball and make shortcuts, but it's you only have limited space, and so really I give them credit because it's important to continue to just see each other and say hi and talk through Zoom and try to do some physical activity. But it's not
well
easy.
Actually, I would say I give you credit as the parent on endorsing and encouraging all of this. I mean, that's also part of the equation, is that all of a sudden there's so many different functions that parents didn't need to be the school teacher, but by the way, now you're the teacher by homeschooling kind of standards, right? So in some cases I am trying to put out a shout out to parents you have to be the one that's encouraging and putting your students through that. And I have my sympathies with the schools on being able to adjust this, but at the same token, there's certain parameters I think that health, let's call it the boring logistics side, and maybe I'm too much of the nerd that puts everything down on paper, but it also kind of goes to show us there are other things as far as like the monikers of health and why are we learning certain things. One example that I'm kind of referring to was they were learning about heart rate and how to take your heart rate. But I don't think there was too much what to the why. What does heart rate mean when it comes to athletics? Like that should be more of a measurement of intensity, right? So if that's a measure of intensity, then it's not a matter of how many things that you're kind of coming up with. It speaks more towards the goal of what your sport or whatnot that you would need. For example, as soccer players, I'm sure endurance might come to mind as something that would be big for a sport like that.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, I think it's impressive just learning more about what you're doing in all aspects, right? Just since I've been working with you've kind of opened my eyes on it's not just about cranking the highest weight or the most number of reps. There's a holistic approach of how to get your body back in shape, and I've benefited from that.
Oh well, I appreciate that. Job's not done yet.
Yeah, we got a lot to do. Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, what sports did you play back in high school?
So growing up, born in Philly but raised in Ohio. That's where I spent my childhood. I was the typical, you play everything, right? You play baseball and basketball, and I played tennis, and you played all the sports throughout the year because seasons changed. But when I started to specialize and focus, it was tennis. So I played tennis in high school, college, and focused on that.
Did you try to expose your boys to tennis on that side?
Yeah, I probably did it the wrong way. I did it when they were a little young and I was a little aggressive, and those two things went opposite directions.
Yeah, I think those are parental life lessons at times. I try for myself. I mean, I was like you. I played a lot of different sports, but let's just say on how the genetic pool had pull up, I have some attributes that are very helpful to certain things, and then other things. What I am
So
saying
you're
is,
skilled.
yeah. Well, at the same time, I'm not a marathon runner, so I'm just gonna. I didn't get those cards into play, so you work with what you got. But we also have a tendency to try to encourage our kids to do the things that we did, and I think sometimes that can be that's the extra challenge as a parent, and that's why I said to your credit that it's you that was kind of endorsing, and that's why
it's a team, right? So my wife and I and
with GoPro. I have a theory. I think that GoPros were meant to be very movement activated.
and
there
we're
is
just
like
sitting
a
here.
feature on it, so I don't think that it's picking up sound and noise.
It's getting the couch, right?
Oh yeah.
getting all
I
of it.
spaced it out
Yeah.
earlier, and in the worst case scenario, like I said before, with my when I had a conversation with my former director in Kailua, we had talked for so long the battery just died.
Yeah.
But at least I still caught the audio.
Good.
And there's certain things that I think from a podcast that I'm learning. Some people when I mentioned it was like, oh, you do a podcast, and I was like, yeah, I do it with audio. There's video involved. It was like, oh, you have a video? That's weird.
Yeah, that's cool.
So-
I mean, because most podcasts you just kind of it's audio.
Yeah, I have a friend inside the business. She was, I think, the former director over at the Honolulu Club, Bianca. And she has a really interesting European name that I cannot pronounce, and I'm not going to try. But we had worked together in the industry from different angles and different things. But she was running a radio show previously, and I think she's kind of well known locally within the fitness circles for years. And we were kind of talking story because I'd love to be on her podcast and vice versa. But it was just like, yeah, I never got into podcasting. And one thing I've enjoyed, and it's still a learning process, is that it is a lot more, I don't want to say casual, but there's a more at roots conversation, and that's part of the reason.
Well, I think that's credit to you because that's how you make me feel comfortable about this, but you have that style that can make it seem that way.
Well, I'm just a blabbermouth.
No, I mean
I
that's
appreciate
that's a
that.
skill to be able to host a show and to be able to podcast and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think as a fitness coach, and I'm sure especially inside your job, you end up wearing a lot of hats, right? Especially as the athletic director. I think there's one part that we're always pushing ourselves to be athletic, at least from a health standpoint, especially once college sports usually go by the wayside for a lot of us. I mean, percentage-wise, how many people usually even go into professional degrees of sports after college, right? It's a small number, which also makes me feel like super sad because there's a lot of students out there that college sports could be their ticket to even go to college, period.
That's true.
So I see there could be a lot of blowback from this, from a financial sense, but also as an academic sense and lifestyle sense moving forward for a lot of people. But one thing about wearing a lot of hats is that it's hard to be, in my opinion, not impossible, because I know some great coaches that have come through at least UFC gym that were introverted. But if your job could be a lot more difficult if you don't have a more outgoing personality. And to be honest, I have to say, if I had to rate myself, I'm probably more introverted. And for me, when the lockdown happened, I was actually kind of happy not to always be around people.
Wow.
From maybe a managerial sense.
Right.
Did you feel that? Because you never. It doesn't sound like you really ever. It stopped. Like you were still the way you were talking to people just changed. That was about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big change for me personally because my world in college at University of Hawaii is external. So, I have to go to the events and we entertain donors and we work with corporate sponsors and we work with alumni. So a lot of it is face to face, and we didn't have it.
So this is a little bit more on the natural side for you.
Yeah, well, I miss it, right? 'Cause, I mean, I doing it through Zoom, you only get so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to me, Zoom is tiring, right? It kind of zaps my energy. Where this does the opposite. I'm like, like we can interact and not, that to
Were
me.
you the one that was telling me you probably were that there was a literal term of like a Zoom fatigue?
Oh, I
or
don't know if it was
something like
me,
that?
but I agree. I believe it. Yeah. Just because we're on Zoom for so many meetings and I just feel like I'm wiped out after that. But, I can go pre-COVID, I can go the whole week with, face-to-face meetings, conference room meetings, events at night and, dinners and all that kind of stuff. I can go the whole week for that. No problem because, I thrive on.
There's
I
a
like
lot
that.
more interaction.
There's energy, right? I think there's energy when there's, people, together.
How has that changed? Because just like you were mentioning, when you have all these fundraising events and whatnot, like what is UH doing about that? How is that going along?
Yeah, I mean, just our entire model changed. Everything from fundraisers became virtual fundraisers, right? It was, banquets where, fundraising dinners where you would be at home and somebody would drop off the food and then you would be on a Zoom and you could all eat together on
Wow,
Zoom.
is that what happened?
So I've seen
okay.
that. I've seen virtual golf where you play golf with whomever you want, your friends, right? And everybody is hopefully protected. And then you send your score in, and then they kind of do a banquet with everybody saying, okay, my score was this, and Vince's score was this, and the winner is, and but you're not together.
I have never heard
Yeah.
that, but I'm of course I'm not going to hear about this. Wow, I
Yeah.
didn't know that was something that was happening.
I mean, a lot of those types of things, everybody's adapting, and even for the marketing team at the and athletics, they would always shoot shirts into the stands, and
Right.
you'd have all sorts of contests. If you're watching a game, now they have to do it through digital stuff. Through the internet,
Send us
through
your email.
Instagram. There's
Wow.
trivia contests on Instagram. So if you're watching a basketball game, you can answer a question, and we'll mail a hat to you or something. So we're trying to change it around, but at the same time, continue to keep that connection that continue to watch UH sports.
Right. Well, I told you this has a little bit of a special place in my heart because my grandmother used to work at the alumni department over at UH.
You have a lot of connections with UH.
Yeah, it was. My grandmother was a very special person. I forgot she even supposedly won a title of Mother of the State.
Wow.
I'm not even sure what the context was, but I mean I was probably like not even 7 at the time, and I
Wow.
remember always playing. Where was those little not Quonset huts, but there's. You were saying that her offices, and by office we mean like those little portable things in
Yeah.
like the back of the gym.
That's right.
what
They're
you
still
call
there,
it.
I think.
Yeah, and I was a kid that was always playing around with like not the monkey pods, but there was like some type of tree that
Yeah.
what you call it. And I would always have my GI Joes with me or something. So. But yeah, my grandmother, we as a family, we always had 50-yard line
Yeah.
seats, all what you call it. And I remember it was like the old timers that refused to call this not the Warriors, it's Go Bows.
Yeah.
So
The Rainbows.
I will always call it the Rainbow Warriors.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it was. I didn't go. I went to UH just for a few classes and a few semesters, but it always like the athletic side of it. Just knowing that I had so many friends that played on the field and a whole bunch of different sports, and some of us are still kind of living somewhere like myself in some degree of the the fitness industry and
That's great.
whatnot. So, but what's a few things? I know we talked about a lot of different things as far as like high school involvement, personal involvement with parents and kids and sports. What would be some other points of advice that you could say for people? Obviously, maybe focusing a little bit more on that high school to college transition, because I think that's a very confusing thing for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's a timely question because right now, I think one of the topics that is getting more and more attention is mental health.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even before COVID, mental health for young adults was the number one issue from the NCAA, right? The NCAA that has all these schools, they've noticed that student athletes' mental health is becoming an issue, right? Just the pressure of managing school and practice and competition and social life. So that continued to rise.
How are
just
they?
imagine, right? COVID now.
Right. You know, I was always talking to people, and maybe in some other podcasts, about like the social awkwardness, like how I said that there was. It's almost like its own muscle that you have to be practicing, right? You know, even before COVID, public speaking wasn't something that most people liked to enjoy, and it's almost very much of a skill set to even start having conversations. I think what are some things that UH is looking at as far as trying to help student athletes cope with mental health? Off the top of my head, and I think that one thing, the biggest missing component about being a college athlete, especially as somebody that I've gone away for school, played sports at up in Washington and whatnot. Before it was your team becomes your family, and that becomes its own controlling factor. So I couldn't imagine that so many different athletes that come in from the mainland that don't have family here. How do they cope with it? But even more so, how is UH trying to accommodate for some of these challenges?
I mean, you didn't mention the number one. It is your teammates, your coaches, your family. Just to make sure that you continue to check in, right? See how you're doing. If there's anything you need, how can we help? Just continuing. And obviously, it's easier to do it when you're face to face. So you have to make efforts to do that through phone, texting, those kind of things. Our coaches are aware of that, and the Zoom meetings or check-ins. Sometimes it's just, we're not going to have a virtual practice. We're gonna just sing songs and play games, just to be not as intense of what they're trying to do, but just to check in and make sure everybody's okay. I do think one of the nice things that we have at the university is there's a support structure from the president of the university all the way down to the lowly associate AD that we're all there, right? And we make sure our student athletes know that if they ever need to talk to somebody, if there's ever an issue and they want to share it, open door. We have this, another thing that we have is there's an app that we've worked with an outside company. I think it's Talkspace. So it's a mental health type of app where you can get confidential and personal service with a counselor, and you can just check in and say, hey, I'm depressed, or I broke up with my girlfriend or my boyfriend, or whatever the issue is. There's somebody on an app that can reach out and help you.
I'm glad that they have. I've always, as a coach, tried to keep an open door policy about as far as people. If you have any advice, text me.
Good.
If you're in line at McDonald's and you're having a hard time trying to make a choice.
The tough thing is most young adults, the ones that ask for help, that's a no-brainer, right?
Right.
Because
yeah.
it's the ones that don't ask, and that's where you have to rely on a team, right? Everybody has to know everybody and communicate and say, hey, I think Johnny's pretty low, or I heard a family member died, and we gotta kind of circle the wagons and check in.
Right, and I think that brings up the hard part, because if you have to ask me just from my small litmus of the people that I've ever worked with, you're absolutely right. It's the ones that ask help get help.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that don't ask help, unfortunately, they're probably more the majority.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as much as I've always had an open door policy about anybody contacting me, it's not like my phone is ringing off the hook all the time. Even when the lockdown happened, I tried to keep a contingency of some classes and some of the
Mm-hmm.
people that I had as clients and whatnot together, and I would send out workouts and whatnot. But that accountability factor, that's very difficult. I don't know what part of that answer is. In my opinion, though, that is some of the issues from like a health industry or just health and wellness that a lot of people are kind of tackling with, is the fact that some of us, well, if I had to put it on statistical, what is it? I think there's like a 70% obesity rating
Wow.
in America.
I know what
It's
part
past
I am in.
50. It's past 50. Oh, well, when I say obesity, it's based on body fat, right?
Yeah.
If you're above 25 for men, 32 for women. But the point is that if we can admit that there is that statistically, then you would think that there would be a lot more questions being asked on how to improve upon that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the issue, because even right now as the gyms, I don't, now that even though we're up a tier, it doesn't change our bracket whatsoever. Like I thought it was, I don't want to use the word comical, but I thought it was interesting that when they just had the news report on it, it's like, okay, so we're going up on this number and that number, and retail places are unrestricted on this, but gyms, the last one is like, you guys get to still stay in the corner. And as far as I know, statistically, gyms have not been really a major spreader. But it's not without its daily fight on a regular basis, just like what you guys have to do.
Sure.
I'm sure as student athletes, and it's difficult, it's hard. I want to make sure that you guys get as much credit to that, as much as we get credit for putting our efforts on keeping the gym open.
You guys do a great job.
Thank you. It is a big team effort. But at the same token, it's not going to change the perception of people coming out to whatnot. And I really do hope that UH opens up, and I do hope that the students can start to get their workout routines at the students that are speaking of mental health. I know that can be a huge component for many people to help them deal with some of these frustrations. I know it's what helps me on a regular basis, even if I wasn't a trainer. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important just during these times, right? Just to recognize, sometimes, at least for us, we need to give our kids some space, because we're in a house together and we see each other every day. And so, just to recognize if, there are times when we need to be with them to keep them active, and there are times we need to get away from them because they're teenagers, right? And I remember being a teenager too, and just
it sounds like you guys actually do go out as a family and do things on a regular basis, right?
Yeah, I mean, my kids love to go out, right? They're active, and they like to come here every now and then and jump in some of the classes. So it's been good, because you have a little bit of, you're not kind of stuck at home, but it's not where. And my son was talking about this the other day. He's like, I would like to go to a party, because, he just would like to see kids his age and just to sit and talk. But,
Right.
That doesn't happen. And, that's a prime thing in high school, right? Socializing.
Do you kind of lay down some, as a PE coordinator? It's like, we're having a family fitness day. We're going to go hiking at what you call it, sir.
Not so much. I mean, I think I've been lucky that our kids have been kind of self-directed. They will go and take a soccer ball and run around in the park and kind of do their own little workout, or another will go out in the backyard and bump a volleyball around. So we've been lucky that way.
Yeah, I think I was at a disadvantage because I didn't have any weights and things like that, and I felt you can look back on some of my old podcast and workout videos that I started doing. I'm glad I did them, and I'm glad I kind of cut my teeth on some of it. But I also felt very kind of disingenuous.
That's like the Rocky 1, 2, and 3 models, right? Where they're not in the high-tech gym and Rocky's in the barn.
Isn't that probably one of the greatest training montages that a film has ever put out? I'm just going to put that out there.
I told my son about that the other day. I said, you know, if you want to get inspired, watch some of the Rocky movies of when he's starting to work out for the big fight. Because, you know, he's lifting boulders, he's running up a mountain, right? You don't have all the fancy equipment all the time, and he still does it.
I think it's funny because what's your favorite Rocky?
Maybe two against Mr. T.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to say Rocky 3 for myself.
That's the Russian?
Yes, that was the Ivan Drago.
Yeah.
But I thought it was, speaking of the montage, it was funny because it was that thing, like he's literally in a barn training in like the Siberian, wilderness of things, chopping trees, picking up like ox yokes and walking. And meanwhile at the Russian gym, it was they're pumping up Dolph Lundgren full of steroids, and he's running around a track that has like a speed bag that he has to like punch every time to and I on one side of it I find it funny because when you put on the trainer eyes, I was like, none of this is working. Like I wouldn't pick this as a workout routine at all. It's inspiring. But I probably I don't know how lifting an ox cart with the load that's so centered right over the tires is really serving as
Hollywood. It's all the Hollywood magic.
Well, yeah, and then why are there LEDs when you have to pull out a steroid syringe? Is it electrified now? Well, how is that working? But it's I don't know. There's things like. I think it's a really cool thing to see, but once again, talking about the disingenuous, just as much as like I love watching that as Hollywood theatrics, I just didn't really feel like it was legitly talking to what we do, or at least what I did as an athlete. And I think it was a good idea for people to get out and like do more home-based workouts. But at the same token, I also don't think that if you don't enjoy doing it, you're not going to do it.
True.
I could tell you scientifically all the things that you should be doing, and here's all the parameters that you should be at. But if you don't actually like it, then well, I don't know. In
it's
a
waste of
world,
time.
Well, I think it's on a practical logistical side, it wouldn't be a waste of time because at least you're walking to the direction. But the question I now have to ask you is like, well, how long are you going to be kind of fighting against yourself to continue doing that thing? So I always encourage more people, and this is kind of one of my things going back to the high school and intermediate and PE level, is like finding something that you like. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of things that are on the menu when you're talking about home workouts. But at the same token, then once you do find something, like trying to keep up that regimen and consistency to make you at least a competitive athlete when it comes to like the high school to college level, because that's when I think things start kind of changing for a lot of people. You become like this professional, non-professional player. Yeah, right. I agree. So, but that's, I think, I kind of all have a plus. Yeah, Rocky 3 was still the best one. I haven't kind of got into the others. So, anyhow, you know what? This was a really joy to talk to you.
Thank you
so much for.
I enjoyed this. This is great.
It's it is fun. So what's a few things that since we were talking about how can people get in touch with maybe you for some questions, as well as some of the other advice. Is there a website at UH for them to get a hold of maybe a coach, or how would a high school student be able to go along?
Well, we encourage all potential student athletes, right? We call them PSAs. Anyone interested in participating in a sport at UH, call the coach, reach out to the coach, emails. Be patient, right? Be thorough, be proactive, right? Because a lot of times, coaching, to me, coaching is not a title, it's a lifestyle, right?
Yes.
You're a coach. It covers everything that you do, and they're busy. So, just be persistent, and hopefully, it'll work out for you. And it's all about a fit, right? It's important that the student athlete interview the coach as well as the coach is kind of interviewing the student athlete. Got to fit.
Right. And that they can find all the information and the coach's information.
Yeah, hawaiiathletics.com, and we're all there. All the programs, all the info he needs online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I will. Yeah. No. So thank you so much, Vince.
Thank you.
And I will probably see you at our next training session.
I appreciate it. Great job.
No problem.
Yeah, that was good.